Welcome to the Story Behind Scripture Books of the Bible series. Today, an in-depth look at the book of Ezra.
God kept a 70-year promise to the exact year, and he started it through a pagan king that literally no one saw coming.
Yeah, I mean, if you were a Jewish exile living in Babylon in, say, 539 BC, your world was over. Completely over.
Right, just total devastation.
Exactly. Your majestic temple was ash. Your royal lineage was essentially wiped out. You were living as a captive in the most formidable empire on the planet.
Wow.
But entirely behind the scenes of global politics, a divine countdown timer was about to hit zero.
That is just the immense scale of the story we are stepping into today. I mean, welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here.
Today we are opening up the book of Ezra. We're doing a real documentary-style exploration here, looking at a huge stack of historical records, archaeological notes, and biblical text.
Right, because this is a stunning narrative of exile, unlikely restoration, and just divine precision.
Yeah, and if you listening right now have ever felt like history is just spinning out of control, or maybe the promises are forgotten, well, this deep dive proves otherwise.
It really does.
It is a story about the meticulous timing of God and how he actually orchestrates global empires to bring his people home. But, to really feel the impact of what happens in this text, we can't just start with the liberation.
No, you definitely can.
Right. We have to understand the sheer devastation that came first. I mean, you don't get the miracle of the return without first surviving the nightmare of the exile. So take us back to 586 BC. What actually happened to these people?
Well, we really have to imagine the physical and psychological horror of the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem.
Brutal, right?
Beyond brutal. King Nebuchadnezzar didn't just conquer the city. I mean, he dismantled its very soul.
Wow.
Solomon's temple, which had stood for centuries as the literal epicenter of God's presence on earth, was just stripped of its gold, burned to its foundations, and reduced to rubble.
And the royal family too, right?
Yeah.
Line of David.
Yeah, tragically. The royal family of David was brutally decimated. King Zedekiah was actually forced to watch his own sons executed before his eyes were gouged out. Yeah, ensuring that the slaughter of his lineage was the very last thing he ever saw.
That is unspeakably brutal. I mean, that's psychological warfare meant to completely shatter a national identity.
It was highly effective, too. After the destruction, the Babylonians gathered up the survivors, the skilled workers, the intellectuals, the nobility.
The ones they could use.
Right, and they forced them on a 900-mile death march across the harsh, ancient Near Eastern terrain all the way back to Babylon.
I can't even fathom that. Imagine being uprooted from your ancestral homeland and forced to walk the equivalent distance of New York to Chicago.
In chains.
Right, in chains, just to serve the empire that just burned your world to the ground.
And once they are there, the theological crisis has to be even worse than the physical captivity, honestly.
Wait, how so? Explain that.
Well, if you are an ancient Israelite, your entire understanding of the cosmos is tied to the temple and the land.
Okay, right.
So if your temple is destroyed, the logical conclusion in the ancient world is that your god has been defeated.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, Marduk, the god of Babylon, appears to have completely crushed Yahweh, the god of Israel.
It says the strongest god wins and the winner takes the spoils. That was just the logic back then.
Exactly. That was the prevailing logic of the ancient Near East. So for decades, the Israelites are sitting by the rivers of Babylon, weeping, wondering if the covenant is completely dead.
Just a total crisis of faith.
But there was a prophet named Jeremiah who had gone on record before the destruction.
Yes, Jeremiah.
He prophesied that this exile was not a defeat, but a discipline, and he put a highly specific timestamp on it.
Which is crazy to think about.
Right. He said the captivity would last exactly 70 years.
Exactly 70 years. Which brings us to the geopolitical earthquake that kicks off the book of Ezra.
The shift.
Right, 70 years are wrapping up and the world stage shifts dramatically. We move from the dust of captivity in Babylon right into the glittering throne room of Persia. The year is 538 BC.
And this shift happens through a man named Cyrus the Great. Yeah. In 539 BC, the Medo-Persian Empire conquers Babylon. Overnight, Cyrus becomes the most powerful man on the planet.
Just massive power.
He commands an empire that stretches from the Indus River all the way to the Mediterranean. And the very next year, 538 BC, we get the opening lines of the book of Ezra.
Oh, I love this verse.
Ezra 1.1 lays it out in the ESV. It says, "In the first year of Cyrus king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia.
Stirred up the spirit. I mean, that phrase stops me in my tracks.
It's incredible.
Cyrus is a Persian emperor. He doesn't worship the god of Israel. He's worshiping Ahura Mazda or, other Persian deities.
Right, he's fully pagan.
He has absolutely no idea he is participating in a Hebrew prophecy.
It is a stunning display of divine sovereignty. We are looking at God exercising absolute authority over pagan empires.
Reminds me of that proverb.
Yes, the writer of Proverbs captured this dynamic perfectly centuries earlier in Proverbs 21.1.
How does it go again?
It says, "The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he will."
Wow.
The most powerful, heavily armed autocrat on the face of the earth is nothing more than an irrigation ditch in the hands of the sovereign God.
Just a ditch.
Yeah, God just digs a little trench, redirects the water, and waters the exact field he wants watered.
I really want to sit with that stream of water analogy for a moment because I want to connect it to how power actually works.
Sure.
I picture a grandmaster chess player.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right. When you watch the best in the world play chess, they don't just use their own pieces to attack. They are so brilliant that they manipulate the board to force the opponent to use their own pieces, their own momentum, to trap themselves.
That's exactly it.
The grandmaster wins by moving the opponent's pieces. But, I am genuinely stuck on the why here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, if God wants to liberate his people, why use a pagan emperor at all? Why not miraculously raise up a mighty Israelite warrior, give him supernatural strength, and have him liberate the captives the way Moses liberated them from Pharaoh, or, David defeated Goliath?
That is a great question. We really have to look at what God is communicating to the broader world through this.
Okay.
If God only uses an Israelite to save the Israelites, the surrounding empires of Babylon and Persia might look at that and say, well, the Israelites have a pretty strong local tribal deity.
Right, just a regional god fighting another regional god.
Exactly. But by taking the sovereign ruler of the known world, a man who doesn't even know Yahweh, and effortlessly moving his heart to fulfill a Hebrew prophecy, God is putting the entire globe on notice.
He's flexing.
He really is. He's demonstrating that he is not just a localized deity restricted to the hills of Judea. He is the creator God of heaven and earth. He owns the whole chessboard.
He owns the board, and the pieces don't even realize they are being moved.
Exactly.
And what Cyrus actually does with this newly stirred up spirit is radical for an ancient conqueror.
Unheard of, really.
Right. He issues a written decree that allows the Jewish exiles to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. He doesn't just sign a passport, though.
No, he doesn't.
He literally funds the expedition out of his own treasury.
And he goes even further than funding it, actually.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Cyrus orders his officials to go into the royal Babylonian vaults and retrieve the 5,400 gold and silver temple vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had looted decades earlier.
The original vessels.
Yes. He hands these priceless sacred artifacts back to the Jewish leaders. And, for anyone listening who loves history, we don't just have to take the biblical text's word for this.
Oh, this is the archaeology part.
Right. This is one of those incredible moments where archaeology completely intersects with scripture.
Are you talking about the Cyrus Cylinder?
Yes, the Cyrus Cylinder. Discovered in 1879, it is this barrel-shaped clay cylinder covered in Akkadian cuneiform.
And they found this where?
It was found in the ruins of Babylon. It essentially serves as Cyrus's geopolitical press release after he conquered the city.
Just a big ancient billboard.
Exactly. And it independently verifies his historical policy. The cylinder explicitly records his decree to allow exiled peoples to return to their homelands and to rebuild their destroyed sanctuaries.
Wow, so it lines up perfectly.
Perfectly. He believed that by appeasing all the local gods of his empire, they would pray for him and bless his reign. It is a secular historical corroboration of exactly what we read in Ezra chapter 1.
It just gives you chills to see the ancient clay backing up the parchment like that.
It really does.
But, it's one thing for a king to issue a decree in a luxury palace. It's entirely another for people to actually pack up their lives and walk.
Right, because the reality on the ground was very different.
Exactly. Because Jerusalem isn't some bustling city waiting for their arrival. It has been a burnt-out wasteland for half a century.
Yeah. Returning meant walking 900 miles across the desert back to a pile of rubble.
Just a staggering thought.
And yet, nearly 50,000 exiles volunteer to make this journey.
50,000.
50,000. We often glaze over that number, but think about the logistics. We are talking about The elderly, pregnant women, small children carrying all their belongings and herding livestock.
Across treacherous territory.
Very treacherous, bandit-infested territory. It would have taken months of grueling, exhausting travel.
And leading this massive caravan are two figures who carry immense theological weight, right?
Right.
We have Zerubbabel, who is the civil governor, and Jeshua the high priest.
And their lineage is everything here.
Unpack that for us.
Well, Zerubbabel is a direct descendant of King David. He is the grandson of King Jehoiachin, who had been taken into exile.
Okay.
And Jeshua is a direct descendant of Aaron, the first high priest.
Wow, so you have the royal Davidic line and the priestly Aaronic line.
Exactly. Both preserved through the devastation of Babylon, rising from the ashes to lead the people home.
So they finally arrive in Jerusalem in 536 BC. I imagine the shock of seeing the absolute desolation of their homeland.
It must have been heartbreaking.
Right. But when they finally drop their bags and start working, their priority completely surprises me.
Oh, about what they build first.
Yeah. They don't immediately start building massive defensive walls. They don't start clearing land for their own farms or building homes to survive the coming winter. The very first thing they prioritize is rebuilding the altar on its original foundation.
The altar.
Why the altar? I mean, if you are surrounded by potentially hostile locals in an undefended wasteland, wouldn't a wall be the most practical first step?
Well, pragmatically, yeah, a wall makes sense.
Right, for safety.
But theologically, the altar is the heart of their entire existence. The altar represents the sacrificial system, which is the singular mechanism of their covenant relationship with God.
Okay, I see.
They understood why they had been exiled in the first place. They lost their home because they had broken the covenant and worshipped false gods.
So it's a statement.
It is a profound public declaration. By building the altar first, they are saying, we need God's atonement, God's forgiveness, and God's presence far more than we need physical security.
That's powerful.
They realize that an impenetrable wall means absolutely nothing if God is not dwelling inside the city.
Man, that requires a staggering amount of faith, prioritizing the spiritual reality over the immediate, terrifying physical threat of their neighbors.
Yes.
And this devotion leads to a moment of immense emotional weight.
It really does.
Once the altar's functioning, they spend months gathering materials. Cedar wood from Lebanon, hiring masons and carpenters. Finally, they gather to officially lay the foundation of the new temple.
And the text in Ezra chapter 3 describes this scene that feels almost chaotic in its emotion.
Yeah, walk us through that scene.
It is arguably one of the most poignant, raw scenes in the entire biblical narrative. Ezra 3.11 through 13 sets a massive dedication ceremony.
Like a huge festival.
Exactly. The priests step forward in their sole liturgical apparel with trumpets. The Levites are clashing cymbals.
Sounds loud.
Oh, very loud. They begin to sing antiphonally, calling and responding to one another, singing the ancient refrain. For he is good, for his steadfast love endures forever toward Israel.
See, that sounds like a scene of pure, unadulterated triumph.
Right.
But the sources point out a jarring detail here. The celebration is deeply, deeply fractured.
Very fractured.
The younger generation, the people who had been born in Babylon and had only ever heard stories of a temple, they are shouting at the top of their lungs for joy.
Because to them, seeing a foundation laid is an impossible miracle.
Right. But then there are the older men.
The elders, the ones who were in their 70s or 80s.
Yeah, what's going on with them?
Well, these men had been children or teenagers before the exile. They had seen with their own eyes the staggering, breathtaking glory of Solomon's original temple.
Which was massive, right.
Huge, a structure overlaid with unimaginable amounts of gold, standing as the crown jewel of the Middle East.
Wow.
So when they look at this new foundation, they don't shout for joy. They weep with a loud voice.
The text says the sound of the shouting and the sound of the weeping mingled together so deeply that people standing far off couldn't distinguish the joy from the sorrow.
It was just one massive, complex roar of human emotion rolling over the hills of Judah.
I've been trying to put myself in the shoes of those older men.
It's hard to imagine.
I mean, imagine you grew up in a magnificent, sprawling family estate that your grandfather built. It was your pride and joy.
Okay.
One day you watch it burn to the ground because of a fire you accidentally started. Decades pass. You finally get to go back to the plot of land and you see a much smaller, rougher, more modest structure being built in its place.
Right.
I'm stuck on this weeping, though. Are these elders just being cynical and nostalgic? Like, are they crying because the new building isn't as pretty, or is something much deeper going on here?
Oh, it's a profound intersection of grief and grace.
Grief and grace.
Yeah, there is certainly the grief of comparison. The new foundation was visibly smaller and less opulent than Solomon's. But it goes far beyond architecture.
What else is it?
When they look at that modest foundation, they are staring directly at the physical consequences of their own generation's sin.
The guilt.
Yes. They're remembering the siege, the starvation, the friends and families slaughtered by Nebuchadnezzar's swords. They are weeping over the decades of lost time and the agony of the exile.
That is heavy.
But simultaneously, they are standing on the soil of their homeland. They are breathing the air of Jerusalem, watching smoke rise from the altar of their God.
Right. They actually made it back.
They are realizing that despite their catastrophic failures, God kept his promise to bring them back. It is the crushing pain of consequence colliding head-on with the overwhelming relief of grace.
Wow.
You just can't separate the tears of sorrow from the tears of joy.
The pain of consequence colliding with the relief of grace. That is so deeply human.
It really is.
But of course, the emotional high of laying that foundation immediately hits a brick wall of geopolitical reality.
Doesn't it always?
Right. Because if there's one constant in history, it is that progress always attracts opposition.
Without fail. The moment the foundation is laid, the local inhabitants take notice.
Who are these locals?
These are primarily the Samaritans and other groups who had been resettled into the region by the Assyrian Empire over a century earlier.
Okay, got it.
Initially, they approach Zerubbabel with what looks like an olive branch. They say, "Let us build with you, for we seek your God as you do, and we have been sacrificing to him ever since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria."
Which, on paper, sounds like a massive win.
It does sound great.
Right. You are a vulnerable group of refugees trying to build a massive stone structure. The locals offer extra labor, extra funds, and local political cover. Why on earth would Zerubbabel reject an offer of bipartisan cooperation?
Because Zerubbabel understands the deadly trap of syncretism.
Explain syncretism for us.
It is true that these local groups worshipped Yahweh, but they worshipped him as merely one god among many.
Oh, I see.
When the Assyrians resettled them, they brought their own pagan gods with them. So they would offer a sacrifice to Yahweh on a Tuesday, and then sacrifice to a fertility god or a sun god on Wednesday.
A little bit of everything.
Exactly. And Zerubbabel recognizes instantly that accepting their help means merging their sacred covenantal work with pagan practices.
It would pollute the whole project.
It would inextricably link the new temple to idolatrous neighbors. And he knows his history. That exact kind of spiritual compromise is what corrupted the nation and provoked the Babylonian exile in the first place.
So he just shuts it down.
Completely.
Zerubbabel draws a hard line in the sand. He flat out refuses their help. He says, "You have nothing to do with us in building a house to our God."
And the adversaries do not take that rejection lightly.
I bet he didn't.
The olive branch snaps, and they turn fiercely hostile. They launch what is essentially a highly coordinated, ancient legal and political smear campaign.
What does that look like in the ancient world?
The adversaries shift from diplomacy to sabotage. They hire professional counselors, essentially ancient lobbyists, to frustrate the building plans at the Persian court.
Lobbyists. Wow.
Yeah, they write formal letters to the Persian officials claiming that Jerusalem has a history of rebellion. They argue that if the Jews are allowed to build this temple and eventually walls, they will stop paying their imperial taxes.
Hitting them where it hurts.
Exactly. They say the Persian king will lose his foothold in the region.
And if there is one thing an ancient emperor hates more than anything, it is the threat of losing tax revenue.
Absolutely.
The smear campaign works flawlessly. The Persian bureaucracy gets nervous, and they issue a royal order to stop the building.
A total stop work order.
The work on the temple grinds to a complete devastating halt. And it stays halted for 16 long years. From 536 BC all the way to 520 BC.
16 years. Just imagine walking past that half-built stone foundation every single day for over a decade and a half.
It would be so demoralizing.
The weeds are growing up through the stones. The timber from Lebanon is rotting. The initial zeal and the tears of joy from the dedication ceremony have completely evaporated.
You can easily see how apathy sets in. The people look at the halted temple and say, "Well, we tried. The politics were against us. God must not want it built right now."
It's a very natural human response.
Right. So they start focusing on their own lives. They start building nice homes for themselves, planting their farms, securing their own wealth. The temple just becomes an afterthought.
But God does not leave them in that apathy.
Right. He steps in.
He sends 2 prophets into the stagnation, Haggai and Zechariah, and their arrival is like a lightning bolt to the conscience of the nation.
What did they say that was so effective?
Haggai and Zechariah don't just yell at the people to work harder, they completely dismantle their excuses.
Oh, wow.
Haggai preaches a blistering sermon where he asks, "Is it a time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses while this house lies in ruins?"
Calling them out directly.
Directly. He explicitly connects their current economic struggles, the droughts, the inflation, the poor harvests they were experiencing, to their spiritual neglect.
So she's saying their physical poverty is linked to their spiritual apathy.
Exactly. He tells them they are putting their wages into a bag with holes because they have prioritized their own comfort over the glory of God.
Man, he forces them to look at their own twisted priorities. But how did these 2 prophets actually manage to break through 16 years of deeply entrenched fear?
It wasn't easy.
Because breaking the law of the Persian Empire to restart a banned construction project could easily result in executions.
Right. They did it by changing the people's gaze.
Their gaze.
Yeah, the people had been staring horizontally at the Persian Empire, at the hostile Samaritans, at the legal decrees. Haggai and Zechariah forced them to look vertically.
Up toward God.
Yes. They reminded them that the geopolitical circumstances were entirely secondary to the covenant promises of God. Zechariah receives visions of God's future glory for Jerusalem, assuring them that it's not by human might or power, but by the Spirit of the Lord that this work will be finished.
And it works.
It completely works. Their preaching reignites the courage of Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and all the people. They pick up their tools and they just start building again, in direct defiance of the standing Persian stop work order.
Which is an incredibly bold, almost suicidal move politically.
Very risky.
And sure enough, the sound of the hammers hasn't been echoing for long before a major Persian official shows up.
Enter Tattenai.
Right. We meet a governor named Tattenai. He's the Persian governor of the massive province beyond the river, which includes Judah.
A very powerful man.
He travels down to Jerusalem, sees the illegal construction, and essentially slaps them with a federal audit. He demands to know who gave you a decree to build this house and to finish this structure.
It's a huge, tense standoff. But notice how the Jewish leaders respond here.
They don't cower, do they?
They don't cower at all. They calmly tell Tattenai their history. They explain that they are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, that their ancestors sinned, but that King Cyrus of Persia had issued a legal decree years ago allowing them to rebuild.
Just laying out the facts.
Right. They tell Tattenai, if you don't believe us, go check the royal archives.
So Tattenai writes a formal letter to the new Persian king, Darius, asking him to verify this story.
Which kicks off quite the event.
Exactly. What follows has to be one of the greatest historical archive hunts on record. I really want to understand the mechanics of this, because in the ancient world, you can't just type Cyrus decreed Jerusalem into a search engine.
No, definitely not.
How did they actually find this document?
It was a monumental bureaucratic undertaking. King Darius orders his officials to search the royal archives in Babylon, where the imperial treasures and records were heavily guarded.
Okay, makes sense to check Babylon first.
Right. Now, ancient Persian records were typically written on clay tablets in cuneiform or on parchment in Aramaic. They searched the vast libraries of Babylon, shifting through thousands of administrative documents, but they don't find it.
Wait, if it's not in Babylon, you'd think they would just give up and tell Tattenai to execute the builders.
You would think so. But Darius is thorough. The search expands across the empire via the Persian courier system, riding along the royal road.
So they keep looking.
Yeah. Finally, about 300 miles away from Babylon, in the Zagros Mountains, they reach a city called Ecbatana.
Ecbatana.
Yes, it was the summer capital where Persian kings would go to escape the blazing heat. They go into the fortress archives there, unroll a scroll, and there it is.
You are kidding.
No, they found it. The original official minute of Cyrus's decree regarding the temple in Jerusalem, detailing the exact dimensions and the funding mandate.
It is the ultimate needle in a 300-mile-wide haystack.
Truly a miracle.
And King Darius's response to finding this scroll is legendary. He doesn't just confirm the old decree and tell Tattenai to leave the Jews alone.
Oh, he goes way beyond that.
He takes it 10 steps further, flipping the script entirely on the adversaries.
Darius writes a blistering response back to Tattenai. He orders him and the local officials to stay far away from the construction site. Let the Jewish governor and elders build.
Okay, good so far.
But then comes the mandate. Darius orders that the cost of the temple construction is to be paid in full to the Jewish leaders, day by day, without fail,
Wait for us?
out of the royal tax revenues of Tattenai's own province.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
The very taxes the adversaries were collecting are now being diverted to fund the temple.
Oh, that has got to sting.
Furthermore, Darius demands they provide the Jewish priests with young bulls, rams, sheep, wheat, salt, wine, and oil every single day so they can offer pleasing sacrifices to the God of heaven and pray for the life of the king.
It is just the most magnificent backfire in ancient politics.
It really is.
The adversaries tried to use the Persian legal system to crush the Jews, and God uses that exact same legal system to force the adversaries to pay for the building and the sacrifices.
Poetic justice.
It is the equivalent of a corrupt city council issuing a stop work order on your house renovation. You appeal it, it somehow goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court not only strikes down the stop work order, they mandate that the corrupt city council members have to pay for your entire house renovation out of their own personal salaries and deliver groceries to your door every morning.
That is a perfect analogy. It is a stunning reversal. The enemies of God are conscripted to fund the worship of God.
Incredible.
And with this massive influx of royal funding and protection, the builders work at breakneck speed. The temple is finally completed and dedicated in the year 516 BC.
Okay, I want to pause on that date, 516 BC.
Yes.
The original temple was destroyed by Babylon in 586 BC. The new temple is finished in 516 BC. That is exactly 70 years to the very year.
This is the divine precision of the entire narrative we mentioned earlier.
Wow.
God orchestrated the rise and fall of global empires, stirred the heart of Cyrus, utilized the smear campaign of enemies, triggered an archive hunt 300 miles away, and moved the pen of Darius.
All of that.
All to ensure that the prophetic clock Jeremiah wound up decades earlier struck midnight at the exact right moment. The 70-year promise was fulfilled flawlessly.
It is breathtaking to see history bend to the will of God like that.
It really is.
So the physical building is complete, the altar is burning, the sacrifices are being made. But a building cannot sustain a covenant.
No, it cannot.
You can have a brand new functioning temple, but if the people worshiping inside it are corrupt, the stones mean absolutely nothing.
That is the hard truth.
Which brings us to the next massive shift in the documentary narrative. The text executes a 58-year time jump here.
Right, a huge leap forward.
The temple is fixed, but the people are broken. And enter our title character, Ezra.
Finally, we meet Ezra. The year is now 458 BC. A new king, Artaxerxes, is sitting on the throne of Persia.
Okay, so we are a long way from Cyrus.
Yes, we are now decades removed from Zerubbabel and the original builders. And unfortunately, the initial zeal has faded into profound spiritual compromise.
Already.
The people desperately need a theological and moral rebuilding. And Artaxerxes issues a remarkable commission to a Jewish man named Ezra, who is still living back in Babylon.
What kind of commission?
Artaxerxes gives Ezra an enormous blank check, vast financial backing from the royal treasury, the political authority to appoint magistrates and judges in Judah, and a specific mandate to teach the law of his God to the people in the region.
The obvious question is, who exactly is Ezra? Why is the emperor of Persia handing over this kind of sweeping authority to him? Because he isn't just a random mid-level bureaucrat.
No, Ezra's resume is unparalleled in his generation. The text takes great care to trace his genealogical lineage all the way back through the high priests directly to Aaron, the brother of Moses.
So he has serious credibility.
He possesses supreme, undisputed priestly authority. But beyond his bloodline, he is described as a scribe skilled in the law of Moses.
And what does that mean back then?
In the ancient world, a scribe wasn't just a copyist taking dictation. A scribe was a brilliant scholar, a theologian, a legal expert who dedicated his life to interpreting and applying the sacred texts.
So he's a true intellectual. And the defining verse for his life, and frankly, one of the greatest blueprints for leadership in the entire biblical text, is found in Ezra 7.10.
Oh, a fantastic verse.
It reads, "For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord, and to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel." I want to break this down because the psychology of this sequence is profound.
Yes, the order matters.
Right. There are 4 distinct marks of his leadership. He set his heart, he studied the word, he practiced it, and he taught it.
The sequential order is absolutely vital. Everything begins with setting the heart.
Setting the heart, what does that mean exactly?
In biblical terminology, the heart isn't just the seat of emotion. It is the control center of the human will, the intellect, and the affections.
Okay.
To set the heart implies a determined, unyielding orientation of allegiance toward God. It is a deliberate anchoring of the soul.
You know, I am looking at that sequence, and I can see how easy it is to try and bypass that first step.
Oh, people do it all the time.
I think about leaders or academics who study relentlessly. They have all the head knowledge. But if you try to study without first setting your heart, what happens?
Without a set heart, studying the text simply becomes a sterile academic exercise.
Right, just data.
It inflates the ego. It creates intellectual pride and arrogant theologians who know the mechanics of the text but don't know the God of the text.
That's a huge danger.
On the flip side, if you skip the heart and jump straight to doing or practicing the law, it devolves into cold, legalistic behavior modification. You get hollow religion.
So setting the heart ensures the study eliminates the mind, which organically transforms the behavior.
Perfectly said.
It makes me think of a world-class surgeon. You want a surgeon who has studied the textbooks exhaustively, but you also want a surgeon whose heart is set on healing people, who actually applies that knowledge in the operating room with incredible bedside manner.
That's a great comparison.
Ezra is the ultimate scholar practitioner. He doesn't dare teach the people until the word has first done its surgical work on his own soul.
Exactly. Ezra's true authority to teach didn't ultimately come from the official letter signed by King Artaxerxes. His spiritual authority emanated from the unimpeachable integrity of his own life. He lived what he studied.
Which makes his next move so compelling.
It does.
Ezra has this deeply anchored heart. He has this blank check from the Persian emperor, and he has this massive mission to go reform the people. But before he can teach a single lesson, he has to actually get to Jerusalem.
And that is the hard part.
He has to survive the exact same grueling 900-mile journey that the first group took decades earlier.
And Ezra's journey is exceptionally vulnerable.
How so?
Well, he gathers a group of about 1,500 men, plus all their wives and children, at a staging area near the Ahava Canal in Babylon. And remember that blank check?
Yeah, the funding.
Ezra is transporting the royal freewill offerings from the king and his counselors. He is carrying literal tons of silver and gold to take to the temple in Jerusalem. Tons. If you calculate the weight mentioned in the text, we are talking about tens of millions of dollars in modern value being transported on foot in a slow-moving caravan.
Through the ancient Near East, which is notoriously infested with heavily armed desert bandits and hostile regional warlords who would slaughter an entire caravan for a fraction of that wealth.
It is a terrifying prospect.
They're very terrifying.
And this creates a massive crisis for Ezra. It is the ultimate collision of faith and pragmatism.
Right.
He is carrying a king's ransom through deadly territory. Any logical, responsible leader would go back to Artaxerxes and request an armed escort, a phalanx of Persian cavalry and archers to guarantee the safety of the women, the children, and the gold.
Which the king probably would have given him.
Almost certainly. But Ezra makes a stunning decision. He completely refuses a military escort.
He refuses the army. I have to admit, reading that, it feels incredibly reckless. Why would he expose his people to that kind of slaughter?
He actually explains his reasoning in Ezra 8.22.
Okay, what does he say?
He writes, "I was ashamed to ask the king for a band of soldiers and horsemen to protect us against the enemy on our way, since we had told the king, the hand of our God is for good on all who seek him, and the power of his wrath is against all who forsake him."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He had already preached a sermon to the pagan king about how omnipotent and fiercely protective his God is.
Yes. Ezra realized the catastrophic damage it would do to his witness.
That makes total sense.
Right. If he went back to Artaxerxes and said, actually, my God is the sovereign creator of the universe, but could I get a battalion of your guards just in case he isn't quite strong enough to handle highway robbers?
It would look terrible.
It would have completely undermined everything he claimed about Yahweh. He staked the reputation and the glory of God on this journey.
So what did they do instead?
So instead of arming themselves with Persian swords, they proclaim a fast. They camp by the river, they fast, they pray, and they throw themselves entirely on the mercy of God for safe passage.
And they walk for 4 months, completely exposed to the elements and the enemies.
And they arrive safely in Jerusalem without losing a single person or a single ounce of gold.
Wow. But, I want to push back on this tension between faith and pragmatism for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
Let's modernize it. Imagine a pastor today walking through a famously dangerous high-crime neighborhood at midnight carrying a briefcase full of millions of dollars in diamonds for a charity.
Okay.
And he refuses to hire security guards just to prove a point to the neighborhood that he trusts God. To our modern ears, that crosses the line from radical faith straight into foolish presumption.
Right. It sounds irresponsible.
Exactly. How do we understand Ezra's action without concluding that hiring security is a sin?
It's a brilliant tension to highlight because the biblical text itself refuses to make Ezra's decision a universal law.
Wait, really? It doesn't.
No, not at all. In fact, just 13 years later in biblical history, Nehemiah makes the exact same journey from Persia to Jerusalem to rebuild the city walls.
Okay, and what does Nehemiah do?
Nehemiah joyfully accepts a massive Persian military escort, complete with army officers and cavalry, and the text presents Nehemiah's military escort as a blessing from God's good hand.
That is fascinating. So why does God demand barehanded faith from Ezra, but sends cavalry for Nehemiah?
It all comes down to their specific callings and the context of their testimonies.
Also.
Well, Nehemiah was a civil governor. His mandate was political and physical security. But Ezra was a priest leading a highly sensitive spiritual reformation.
So they had different roles.
Very different. His primary currency was theological reliance. Ezra had verbally backed himself into a corner by boasting of God's protection to a watching pagan king. To back down in that specific moment would have been a failure of faith.
That makes a lot of sense.
The text isn't giving us a blanket rule against security systems. It is showing us that there are specific moments in a believer's life where God asks for a radical, terrifying act of obedience to prove that his power is real to a watching world.
The context of the testimony dictated the risk.
That clears up so much.
Glad that helps. So Ezra survives this perilous physical journey. He brings the gold to the temple, he safely delivers the families, and they offer massive sacrifices of thanksgiving.
A huge success.
You would think the story ends with a massive victory parade. But he arrives in Jerusalem only to discover that the greatest threat to God's people wasn't the bandits on the road. The true threat was a deep, pervasive spiritual rot festering from the inside.
It is a heartbreaking anticlimax.
What happened?
Shortly after he arrives, the local officials come to Ezra to report a devastating crisis. The Israelites, and worst of all, specifically the priests, the Levites, and the leaders who were charged with guarding the covenant, had deeply intermarried with the surrounding pagan nations.
Oh, no.
Yeah. They had taken foreign wives from the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and others, and were rapidly adopting their abominable, idolatrous practices.
It is history repeating itself in the most agonizing way imaginable.
It truly is.
This is the exact same sin of syncretism that destroyed King Solomon's heart and ultimately caused the Babylonian exile that they just spent 70 years suffering through.
And Ezra understands the stakes immediately.
What does he do?
His reaction is visceral and absolute. He doesn't form a theological committee to study the nuances of the issue. He doesn't write a polite memo to the priests.
Right.
The text says he tears his garments, he literally plucks out the hair of his head and his beard, and he sits on the ground, utterly appalled and devastated in the public square.
Wow, that is intense.
And he sits there in stunned silence all day long until the time of the evening sacrifice at 3 p.m.
Tearing the clothes and pulling out hair. I mean, that is the ancient Near Eastern physical manifestation of profound mourning, right?
Exactly.
He's acting like someone who has just been told his entire family was killed in a tragic accident.
Because he knows that spiritual compromise on this scale is a death sentence for the restored community.
He knows what's coming if they don't fix it.
Right. If this sin takes root, the covenant is breached, and God will remove his presence again. At the time of the evening sacrifice, the time of atonement, Ezra rises from his fasting. He falls to his knees in the pouring rain, spreads out his hands to the Lord, and offers an incredibly moving, raw prayer of confession.
I want to look closely at the words he uses in that prayer.
Let's do it.
In Ezra 9:6, he cries out, "Oh my God, I am ashamed and blush to lift my face to you, my God. For our iniquities have risen higher than our heads, and our guilt has mounted up to the heavens."
The pronouns are the key to understanding his leadership here.
Notice that he does not say, "God, I am ashamed of them."
Exactly.
He doesn't point a self-righteous finger and say, "Look at what these wicked people have done." He says, "I am ashamed for our iniquities, our guilt."
And Ezra didn't commit this sin. He had just arrived in town. He certainly didn't marry a pagan wife. Yet he uses we and our.
He explicitly identifies with the people's sin.
He steps into the mud with them. He takes the staggering burden and the guilt of the entire community upon his own shoulders as he intercedes before a holy God.
That type of intercessory leadership is vanishingly rare. He isn't lecturing them. He is mourning for them.
It's beautiful.
But, as beautiful as his prayer is, I have to bring up a major tension here.
Oh, definitely.
The resolution to this crisis is that the people enter a covenant to send away their foreign wives. And we really need to anticipate how incredibly uncomfortable this scene makes a modern reader.
Very uncomfortable.
Because to our ears today, demanding that a community separate from foreign spouses sounds intensely harsh. It triggers alarms about xenophobia, ethnic cleansing, or racial supremacy.
It sounds terrible to modern ears.
Right. How do we read this text faithfully without imposing modern sociological frameworks onto it? Was this about ethnic racism?
It is a vital, necessary distinction to make. If we read this as a text about ethnic purity, we are profoundly misinterpreting the entire biblical narrative.
Okay, explain that.
This was never about race or bloodlines. It was exclusively about covenant holiness. We know this for a definitive fact because the broader Old Testament actively welcomes and celebrates foreigners who join Israel.
Right. The lineage of Jesus is filled with foreign women.
Exactly. Look at Rahab. She was a Canaanite prostitute in Jericho. Yet she abandoned her pagan gods, hid the Israelite spies, embraced Yahweh, and she is celebrated in the lineage of King David.
A Canaanite.
Yes. Look at Ruth. Ruth was a Moabitess, a nation born out of incest that historically oppressed Israel. But Ruth looked at her Israelite mother-in-law and said, "Your people shall be my people, and your God my God."
A total shift in allegiance.
Right. She bound herself to the covenant, and she became the great-grandmother of King David. They were welcomed, protected, and written into royal history.
Because they abandoned idolatry and embraced the covenant. So the crisis in Ezra's day was not that these women had a different skin color or came from a different zip code.
Not at all. The crisis was that they were actively importing the worship of false gods into the very homes of the Israelite priests. It was religious syncretism.
Which destroys the covenant.
Right. If the high priests of Yahweh are going home and offering incense to a Canaanite fertility god with their wives, the distinct, holy witness of God on earth vanishes. The nation becomes just like every other pagan tribe.
That makes it much clearer.
The Apostle Paul applies this exact same spiritual principle in the New Testament when he writes to the Corinthian church in 2 Corinthians 6. He commands them, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers."
Oh, that verse.
He isn't talking about race. He is talking about spiritual incompatibility. Light cannot fellowship with darkness. In Ezra's day, this was a drastic surgical separation required to save the spiritual life of the nation before the infection killed them all.
A surgical amputation to save the body. It is painful, but it is necessary for survival.
Exactly.
And seeing Ezra weeping, tearing his hair, praying in the freezing rain, taking their guilt upon himself, it shatters the hardness of the community's heart.
It truly breaks them.
They gather around him in massive numbers, they weep bitterly with him, and they voluntarily commit to covenant renewal. They do the excruciatingly hard work of repentance.
Which is the ultimate goal of Ezra's ministry. He didn't just teach the law, he facilitated the restoration of their hearts to God.
Now, as we begin to pull the camera back from these individual historical events, from Cyrus's decree to the foundation weeping, to Ezra in the rain, a much grander, breathtaking architectural blueprint begins to emerge.
A huge blueprint.
Because these events in the book of Ezra aren't just isolated historical facts. They are actively, purposely paving a road.
Yes, they are paving the road directly to the Messiah.
Let's explore this.
Okay.
Because I love comparing the biblical narrative to a masterful, multi-generational film franchise.
Oh, I like where you're going with this.
When you watch a brilliantly directed series of movies, the director will hide these little clues, these foreshadowing moments or Easter eggs in the first movie. At the time, you don't fully understand them. But when you watch the final movie, suddenly all those hidden clues make complete, mind-blowing sense.
Thematically brilliant.
Theologically, we call this typology. The book of Ezra is packed with these typological Easter eggs pointing straight to Jesus Christ.
Yes. Typology is how God weaves prophetic meaning into the actual fabric of history. It's not just a metaphor, it's historical foreshadowing. Let's look at the clues Ezra gives us.
Where do we start?
Start with the leadership of the very first return. Zerubbabel, the civil governor who led the people out of Babylonian exile, is the grandson of the exiled king. By leading the return and refusing to compromise with the Samaritans, he preserves the royal Davidic line.
Okay, I track with that.
If you fast forward hundreds of years and open the New Testament to the very first chapter of Matthew, you find Zerubbabel sitting right there in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in Matthew 1:12-13.
That is staggering. I mean, if the return hadn't happened exactly the way it did, under Zerubbabel's specific, uncompromising leadership, the messianic lineage of David could have simply vanished. assimilated into the melting pot of Babylonian history.
Humanly speaking, the preservation of the seed of David was hanging by a thread, but God used the decree of a pagan king, Cyrus, to ensure the lineage of the true and final king survived.
Mind-blowing.
But the clues don't stop with the king. Look at the priest. The high priest who works alongside Zerubbabel to rebuild the altar is named Jeshua.
Jeshua.
Right. In Hebrew, Jeshua is Joshua, and the name Joshua literally means the Lord saves. It is the exact same name given to Jesus.
Oh, wow.
So at the foundation of the restored nation, you have the Davidic royal line and a high priest sharing the name of Jesus, working in tandem to bring God's people home.
The king and the priest.
Yeah.
That's incredible. What about the temple itself? I mean, they spend 20 years, face smear campaigns, endure poverty, and finally rebuild this physical stone structure.
The rebuilt physical temple is a profound type. The temple was the place where God's presence dwelled with humanity. But it points directly to Christ, who is the ultimate reality the temple merely foreshadowed.
Where do we see that connection?
In John 2:19-21, Jesus is standing in front of the massive temple complex in Jerusalem, and he says to the religious leaders, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." John adds the commentary. He was speaking about the temple of his body.
So the building was just a preview.
The physical building constructed in Ezra was a temporary, localized shadow of the permanent cosmic dwelling of God among his people, which is Jesus Christ incarnate.
And we absolutely cannot forget Ezra himself, that climactic moment in the reign where he intercedes for the people.
Ezra's heart-wrenching prayer is one of the clearest shadows of the gospel in the Old Testament.
Because of how he identified with them.
Exactly. Ezra, a righteous man who did not commit the sin, falls to his knees, identifies completely with the guilty people, and cries out, "Our guilt and our iniquities." It is a striking preview of Christ's high priestly intercession.
Wow, yes.
Jesus, who knew absolutely no sin, takes the sin, the guilt, and the shame of his people upon himself on the cross, identifying with us completely in order to absorb the wrath and bring us back into covenant with God.
It's all there. And wrapping all of these clues together is the stunning reality of the timing.
The 70 years.
The breathtaking precision of God, keeping the 70-year promise perfectly on schedule. It sets the pattern for how God operates in the world.
It absolutely does.
Just as God sovereignly stirred the heart of a pagan king, Cyrus, to issue a decree that released his people from exile exactly on time. Centuries later, God would stir the heart of another pagan ruler, Caesar Augustus, to issue a decree for a global census.
Oh, the census in loop.
Right. And that Roman decree would force a young virgin named Mary and a carpenter named Joseph to travel to Bethlehem exactly on time to fulfill the prophecy of the Messiah's birth.
God is never late. The Apostle Paul writes in Galatians 4:4, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son." The book of Ezra proves historically that God's clock is never fast and it is never slow.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, how do we synthesize this massive stack of historical records, decrees, and prayers? What is the ultimate takeaway of the book of Ezra?
Ezra is the quintessential book of restoration. It teaches us a profound, stabilizing theological truth.
Which is?
The God who is holy enough to justly judge sin with the severe discipline of exile is the exact same God who restores his people with lavish, overwhelming grace. He orchestrates global politics. He utilizes the most unlikely means like a Persian emperor or a terrifying journey without guards.
Yeah, totally unlikely means.
And he does it all perfectly on time, continually preparing the way for the greater Son of David, Jesus Christ, to build an eternal temple.
And I want to bring this immense history directly back to you, listening right now.
Yes.
Perhaps you feel like you're currently living in a season of exile.
Yeah.
You feel distant from God, isolated, or you are dealing with the painful, tangible consequences of your own past compromises.
It's a hard place to be.
Or maybe you were in a season where you laid the right foundation, you started doing the right thing, but the progress is just completely ground to a halt because of fierce opposition or crippling apathy.
We've all been there.
The book of Ezra stands in the biblical canon as an enduring historical monument. It screams to us that God is keeping time. He is not done with your story of restoration, and he is still actively moving the hearts of kings.
The historical reality of what God did in 538 BC invites us to relentlessly trust the sovereign hand of God in our present reality today.
It changes how you view everything, which leaves me with one final lingering question for you to chew on as you go about your day.
What is it?
We saw that God can steer the heart of the most powerful, unyielding pagan emperor on earth like a simple stream of water in order to fulfill a promise exactly 70 years later. So with seemingly immovable, impossible obstacles in our world today or in your own life right now are actually just streams of water, waiting for the hand of God to redirect them.
Thank you for joining us on this week's Story Behind Scripture, Books of the Bible series. Next week, we take a deep dive into the book of Nehemiah.
If you'd like to read more about the stories behind Scripture, try Written in Fire, available on Amazon.com. It's the story of the destruction of Solomon's temple, told through the pages of the Bible and the voices of the prophets. The fire that destroyed the city and the temple did not end in ashes, but in a Messiah. Pick up Written in Fire on Amazon today.